Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Today we're going to borrow a title from Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. I'm going to be talking about A Tale of Two October Surprises. I assume that most of you know what an October surprise is, but for anybody who may not know, an October surprise is something that applies really only to presidential elections. Presidential elections are always held on, well, people think it's the first Tuesday in November, but that is actually not true. A bit of trivia for all of you. It's the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's when the election is held, the presidential election, every 4 years. So the election is sometime in the beginning of November. What an October surprise is, it's a sudden news story, a sudden story that hurts one of the candidates. The opposing, well, it's supposed to be the opposing candidate's campaign, but it's off in the media now, the Democratic media. If the candidate is a Republican, the news media will release very often a very damaging story. Well, it happened to Trump in 2016 with the tape. Remember the tape of him making these derogatory comments or not so complimentary comments about women and celebrity. I'm not going to rehearse that, but that was one. But, what matters about that is that the media covered it. But I'm specifically thinking about, here's an old headline. Some of you may be actually too young to even remember this, but this is from the 2000 election, George W. Bush versus Gore. Here's a headline: Bush once pleaded guilty to DUI, that's driving under the influence, drunk driving. I'll just give you this first paragraph. George W. Bush regrets driving under the influence of alcohol 24 years ago, but insisted the revelation just days before Tuesday's presidential election will do little to change voters' minds about him. That's an example, a prime example of an October surprise, because this is an incident, and it's a drunk driving incident that occurred 24 years before the election when, it was known that George W. Bush had a drinking problem in his youth. That was before he married Laura Bush, who straightened him out, told him it was either the bottle or her, and obviously George W. Bush made a very wise decision. But the point I'm getting to here is that this story was from 24 years before the election. As I recall, the media had this story for months, but they didn't release it because they waited until the weekend before the election. That is the whole point. The story comes out right before the election, so it creates a damaging impression, or the opposition hopes that it will create a damaging impression of the candidate, but it's too close to the election for the candidate, the one being attacked, to respond, to do anything about it that would change the voters' minds. Now, the reason I bring this up is because of Hunter Biden and that story. Now, that was a story that the press had, and they didn't release it, right before the election, except for notable exception. Well, they were the ones who broke the story, the New York Post. And what did the rest of the media do? If it had been George W. Bush, or any Republican, Trump, they would have jumped on the story. They would have jumped on it just as they did with George W. Bush in the year 2000. They would have jumped on this story. They would have given it a lot of play, as much as they could. There was also another story, a false story about, this was for 2004 election, I believe, but it was a false story about George W. Bush's National Guard service. It turned out that it cost Dan Rather his career because the documents on which they based it were fake, and they were obvious fakes. Amateur internet sleuths found the problem right away because the documents were created on modern printers with Microsoft Word. All the settings matched, the fonts matched, all that. And it just, Dan Rather was famous for saying, well, the documents are fake, but the story is real. Bottom line, it cost him his career. But now we have this Hunter Biden story. The press had it. Not only did they not report it, except for the New York Post, they suppressed the story. They buried the story. They had, I think it was 50, at least dozens of former intelligence officials publicly state that this looked like Russian disinformation. Twitter shut down the New York Post account for 2 weeks. They would not allow the New York Post to post that story. They would not allow anybody else to link to that story. In other words, they buried the story. Do you see my point? Do you see the contrast between the way the press treated a story about a Republican candidate and a story about a Democratic candidate? It's just shame on the media. I've said this in the past. The media is just disgusting. They are just disgusting. And to add fuel to the fire, well, one thing I'm going to, a little aside here, one thing I'm going to miss from the Trump presidency, if Biden, as it increasingly seems likely, becomes president, hopefully Trump will run again in 4 years and then she'll be back. But I'm going to really miss the Kayleigh McEnany press conferences. She really holds the press to account, and you're going to see it in this video from a press conference that she held today, or a press briefing. It was today, Tuesday. You're seeing this the day after on Wednesday. Well, as always, I urge everybody to go onto YouTube if you haven't seen the press conference and watch the whole thing, the way she handles the press. But this is just at the very end where she makes the exact same point I do, but with several examples, much stronger. And you can hear at the very end as she's walking off, as she always does. She takes all the questions and then she makes a statement at the end and just leaves the press with egg on its face and then just walks off. But this time you have Jim Acosta, who's got to be one of the worst journalists out there. I wouldn't call him a reporter. That would be dignifying because he doesn't really report. He just vents. That's really all he does. He vents and he bloviates. And that's what he did at the very end as she was walking off this time. So you'll want to listen to that. But anyways, that'll be it for today. I'm going to play this video and then I'll be back for my fare thee wells. Here's the video. Enjoy.
Since taking office, President Trump has worked to rebuild trust with our regional partners and identify their shared interests. And unlike the previous administration, which gave Iran piles of cash and a deal with a sunset provision that would have allowed them to get nuclear weapons, this president has isolated Iran. And he's done it through 4 peace deals, which is 4 more than his predecessor. But it's unfortunate that it doesn't give much coverage in the mainstream media. But I guess we shouldn't be surprised, because in the last 48 hours, there have been quite a few stories that have not gotten a ton of coverage in the mainstream media. As former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer said, bias is often found in stories the press does not cover. And last week, we found out that Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell was infiltrated by an alleged Chinese spy. This spy cozied up to Swalwell, raised funds for his 2014 campaign, and even planted an intern in his office. And that relationship continued until the FBI briefed him in 2015. And that was some very good reporting done by Axios. But after entangling with this spy for years, Swalwell hypocritically went on to be one of the lead instigators of the Russia collusion hoax in the impeachment sham. Swalwell wrote this on his congressional webpage: President Trump and his team are directly and indirectly tied to Russia. That was not true. He then said in September of 2020, the president has a compromised relationship with Russia. Untrue. April of 2019, he said President Trump certainly acts on Russia's behalf and acts like Russia's leader. Not true. January 2019, Eric Swalwell said it's pretty clear President Donald Trump is an agent of Russia. Not true. And Swalwell shamelessly claimed Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner had an eagerness and a willingness to work with the Russians during the 2016 election. Again, it was false. In 2019, he falsely claimed this yet again when inquired about collusion by a reporter. And these baseless attacks were false, yet covered breathlessly by the media. There was no coverage, however, of Swalwell being the one implicated with not Russia, but China. In fact, the New York Times website, as of this morning, had not one result for Eric Swalwell's ties to Chinese spies. Not one result. And when the Swalwell story broke, guess how many minutes of coverage it got on ABC, NBC, MSNBC, and CBS? 0. CNN devoted 3 minutes and 16 seconds to it. However, it was covered on Fox. Interesting pre-election and post-election coverage, too, on the Hunter Biden scandal, which was not covered at all by many outlets in the lead up to the election. In fact, on October 15th, you had a New York Times headline that said, Trump said to be warned that he was being given Russian disinformation over Hunter Biden. Now, December 10th, just a few months later, New York Times headline, investigation of Hunter Biden is likely to hang over Biden as he takes office. Washington Post on October 16th, the headline read, the truth behind the Hunter Biden non-scandal. Now you have the Washington Post headline that says this, Hunter Biden tax probe examining Chinese business deals. Politico, October 19th, Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation. That's a favorite. Dozens of former intel officials say, false yet again. December 2nd, now Politico reads, Justice Department's interest in Hunter Biden covered more than taxes. Really interesting turn of events, and good for those who covered what was a story all along and not Russia disinformation.
Isn't it hypocritical for you to accuse others of disinformation when you spread it every day?
Welcome back, and as I said, I am really going to miss the Kayleigh McEnany press conferences if Biden becomes president. I hope she'll find time to do one more, at least. I guess leave the audience wanting more, so I'm wanting more. And I'm wanting also, if it's not too much trouble, a thumbs up if you like this video. Share it with anybody you think would also like the video. Got any comments? Comment section below the video where you can put questions, suggestions for future topics. You could also subscribe. I love getting new subscribers. And you could listen to my music videos. I link to them in the description below the video. I have a separate channel under the name of Allan where I do music videos. I have a new one in the pipeline, hope to have another one soon. If I got enough viewers that I could actually make a living from those music videos and this, I would do, well, I'm already doing one of these once a day. Maybe I can make them better than just kind of off the cuff as I do them now. But I would do a music video every week, probably, if I had the time to do it. That's my problem. No time. No time, and also because of my age, really no time. Not too many years left. I hope I have a few more. So anyways, thanks for spending time with me. I really appreciate the time that you spent with me. I would really like to see all of you again. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.